Hi, welcome to a new episode in the Internet Surfer, hosting the most horror and creepiest stories from Reddit. Please don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy.
Serious people of Reddit, what is your downright scariest real-life story? Episode 7. It happened last year and I am still confused and scared about it. Okay, so it was a Tuesday night and my parents went out to buy us dinner. It was just me, my brother who was sleeping at the time, and my little sister left alone in the house. Everything seemed normal. My sister was busy playing around with her toys while watching TV. She was 9 at the time and I was in the living room with her. She kept looking for something cause she was playing with her toys, wanted to have an extra friend for her toys. Anyways, about an hour passed and my parents came home and my sister went into the bedroom. I went out to open the gate and that's when the scary thing happened. My parents were on the motorcycle with my sister. They went out with my sister, so what I did is I took the food and brought it in quickly, then rushed to the bedroom. Nobody was there. I don't know what in hell happened, but on that night I spent an hour waiting for my parents to come home with someone or something that looked and acted like my sister. Now that I'm thinking about it, I didn't go near my sister at that hour and she didn't speak the entire time. Now always from time to time I pat my sister's head or pinch her cheek to check if she's her. It's been a year and I'm still baffled and horrified about what happened. I've asked my therapist about posting it and they said go for it, so, okay, I was home with my brother. He had a problem with students at school, which inevitably turned into a conflict. So, at home I hear knocking on my door, proceed to answer it, and then was stabbed by a grown man in the thigh. I know it seems unrealistic, but the kid my brother had problems with was not right in the head. Everyone in the high school knew not to mess with him. So fast forward, when he enters the house, he walks right past me as if he didn't just stab me. Go towards my brother and charge him with a knife. I kid you not, my brother dodged the first hit but wasn't so successful on the second. He had a massive gash on his shoulder. As his brother, I got up and charged the guy. I'm not sure what happened after that. It was pretty much a blackout. But when I woke up I was in the hospital with my mother beside me and my father with my brother. Turns out the guy was disarmed and was handled after. And for all of those asking, my father and mom weren't home. They weren't home at the moment. Me and my brother are now fine. He's a football player and I'm a track player and a soon-to-become lawyer. I'm going away to Yukon. I got lost hiking around the fiery furnace in Arches National Park by myself. It's a natural labyrinth with somewhat hard-to-find arrows to help guide you in a general counter-clockwise direction. The park ranger warned us you would have to scramble and climb and get creative to find the trail. Well, I lost track of the arrows and got a little too ambitious with my routes, climbing up and over multiple canyons trying to find my way out of the maze. It was midday, about 90 degrees, and I was sweating bullets carrying all my camera gear on my back. I descended a canyon and found myself in a part of the park with 0 footprints. Instead of immediately turning around, I figured I would take the advice of the park ranger and follow a counterclockwise direction until I found footprints. Turns out I ended up in a part of the park that no other human had been to in a while, as there was only animal tracks. Then I could not remember what canyon I had descended and I was completely lost and running out of water and started to panic. Took me a couple hours to find my way back, doing some sketchy maneuvers, and the second I got to the main trail 100 yards from my car, both of my legs completely cramped, like I could not bend my knees. I gimped straight-legged to my car and felt eternally grateful this did not happen while scrambling around lost. 5. I once was swimming in the ocean. Or more of vibing with the waves, swimming through them when they arrived. Sitting on the sand and letting the waves push me forward. All that kind of stuff. The waves got higher, but not so big that I thought I needed to get out of the water. So I was doing my thing, when a wave just completely ran me over. I hadn't had time to gasp for air or anything, I was just thrown underwater. I was trying to get up but I didn't know where up was. And I kid you not, I felt like I was being pushed down. Not from the wave but from underneath. The place where I was wasn't deep. I could easily stand up and a little under the top half of my body was out of the water. But then there seemed to be no ground. Somewhat after a minute or so I was able to swim back up. Heaven knows how I was able to hold my remaining breath for so long. And when I got out of the water, I was just back where I was. My sister laughed as she stood on the shore. She didn't want to get in. But I was confused as hell. Because I felt like I was drowning, but according to her I was only underwater for a few seconds. 15 seconds max. That was and still is pretty scary to me. When I was in my 6th grade, lunch break, I was walking around the ground floor of our school complex building. It was 12 p.m., and there was these bunch of kids running around while I am standing in front of a wall fan. Our ground floor complex has wall fans on each side of the foundations of the school building. These kids are running playing around, until this one kid slipped and hit his head between the edges of the foundation of the building. There was a lot of blood, and he was bleeding in front of me. There's a lot of blood. He hit his forehead between the grooves of the building foundation, in front of me. People who were inside the building ran toward him while I was standing there, catatonically, seeing a lot of blood flowing through his forehead. I thought his skull was crushed at that point. I ran inside our classroom like nothing happened, shaking my legs from the fear I've experienced there. I wasn't able to help him and I felt guilty. I just sat down and started to draw guns, anime, kid stuff, like nothing happened. When I was a sophomore in high school, about 2015, I and a couple of friends went out one night to shoot some hoops at the local park, I think in total about 7. While they ballin' it up, me and one of the guys took scooters, yes we were all scooter boys, and rode off to an adjacent park connected by trails, no lights, only our tiny phone flashlights to see our way. We intended to go back once we got to the adjacent park, but when we arrived it was dead silent. I understand it was 10:30 to 11 at night, but there was usually a game of basketball or something going on, but it was too quiet. We look around and start to head back when we notice a faint blue light from a police box by the front entrance. We go to investigate and find it completely smashed and wires hanging out of it and bits of glass all over the concrete. I went to see if they were beer bottle pieces when my friend grabs my shoulder. I look at him and he's white as a ghost with his finger up to his mouth keeping me quiet. Standing there where we dumped our scooters was a shirtless crackhead looking down at our scooters holding a chicken dance pose balancing on one leg. This was about 10 feet away from us so we had distance. But holy crap, I almost crapped my pants. What happened next I will never forget. He turned and looked at us holding this damn pose and I swear on all that is holy, he had no whites in his eyes. Only pupils. Then he started hooting like an owl and approached us. I and my friend hightailed it out of there, didn't look back, even left our scooters, damn shame, and ran around the park on an adjacent street for 30 minutes to get back to our group. We met back up with them and as we were screaming, crying, explaining what happened. Every single light went out in the park simultaneously because of the time, but of course we didn't know that. So we all screamed and sardined into the one car we came in and peeled out of that park. I had nightmares about the owl man for weeks afterwards. This image of a man holding a chicken dance pose on one leg in the middle of an abandoned park at 11 at night hooting like an owl will never leave my mind. I know how it sounds, but it was horror at its peak for me. When I was a child, around 4th or 5th grade, there was always something weird about the tree line. We would all play out on the big football field and do our thing, but about 3 or 4 weeks in, something was off. Over by the artificial tree line there was a public swimming pool. Nothing too serious, right? Here's where it gets scary. One day, we saw a random guy just there. Sitting and watching. I thought I imagined it. What was even worse was that during the morning running program, there he was. My mom was there and thought he was just an employee standing out back to smoke and told me not to worry about it. About 4 hours later during recess, the guy finally moved onto the field. He was big, scary, scruffy, looking like he just got out of jail. He walked straight up to the group of girls and legit just grabbed one. There were paras, parent supervisors basically, watching the whole thing and told all of us who was down there to fight him back until they got help. 2 minutes later the man was being pulverized by elementary scholars with jump ropes, kickball, even those of us who were in karate, myself included, using the self-defense techniques we learned. He was arrested and had charges pushed against him by the parents of the girl he tried kidnapping. Was a little bit traumatizing and taught me about self-defense more than karate ever could. When I was younger, maybe 11 or 12, my mother was in an abusive relationship with a really shady guy who seemed nice at first, but they used the prep they had to buy and resell drugs or gamble. This one time he hit my mom in front of my grandma, mom's mom, and then my grandma was trying to call the police when he pulled out some sort of pistol and pointed it straight at her face saying, "If I so much as hear you try to tell on me, I'll blast your face into a million pieces." Seeing this, I grabbed a knife and threw it at him, but it missed, and he then went outside into his shed and came back with a grenade and said he would tie us all up and blow the house, with us inside, up. Thankfully neighbors heard the conversation and screaming, so they called the police, who cuffed him. Whilst walking away he said, staring straight into my eyes, "I'll be back, and you'll know about it." When I was around 7 years old, I and my much older brother, 18, shared a bunk bed. We grew up poor. He liked to play practical jokes on me quite often, but they were always light-hearted. One morning I wake up and I was facing the wall, but there was a shadow on the wall. As I started moving around I heard a voice I didn't recognize say, "If you turn around I will kill you." I asked who's there, and the voice replied, "As long as you don't turn around I will not have to kill you." I had assumed it was my brother playing around, but then I heard him shift in his sleep above me in the top bunk. Realizing it couldn't have been my brother, I hid under the covers, pissed myself, and didn't move for a good 30 minutes. The voice didn't say anything else after that. When I finally worked up the courage to get out of my bed, I woke my brother up in the top bunk, recounted what happened and asked if it was him. He said he likes to joke around, but would never threaten my life. I went to my parents' room and told them the same story, and they said it was probably a dream. Nothing in our house was missing. There wasn't any sign of a robbery or home invasion. I don't believe in ghosts, and I definitely wasn't asleep. This is a core memory I cannot forget. When I was around 14/15, I went to my local mall with my mom and her buff. They were going to go clothes shopping, which I thought was boring, so I told my mom that I would be at Barnes & Noble bookstore. I grabbed a couple books and sat down to read them when I had this weird feeling I was being watched. I looked up and saw this middle-aged man staring at me. I tried to ignore him but got scared when it was just me and him in that particular section of the bookstore, with him just standing there and staring. I got up and went into another section of the store thinking that maybe I was being paranoid, but nope, this man was following me. Wherever I went, he would show up. I eventually ended up running as fast as I could to the Starbucks at the Barnes & Noble, which also just so happened to be the only place at that time that had other people around. I was so scared to leave the Starbucks, thinking the man was going to kidnap me or something. Thankfully my brother was in the mall with his friend, so I called him and asked him to come escort me out of the store. This has happened to me twice. I was going camping with some friends a few years ago. We were like 9. So we go in the forest, we are like a group of 10, and we find an old abandoned park. We start to play until one of my friends shines their light somewhere at the gate of the park. We hear the gate move, so we are all freaking out at this point. Then we hear footsteps coming closer to us. We all shine our lights to whatever was there and we see a grown man in a clown costume walking to us. So basically we all think we are going to die. We run down to the back gate on the other side of the park and then we continue a path to go back to the campsite. It was definitely one of the scariest moments of my life. When I was 8, I was stoked to be invited to hang out with the bigger kid in my neighborhood. He was 15 at the time. One day, he asked me to smoke weed with him. I was really scared to, but I wanted to be a cool kid, so I smoked, did not get high because I smoked incorrectly. About 20 minutes later, dude picks up a knife and starts lunging at me in his house. His parents were gone. I make a beeline for the door and get away as he screams how he was joking. I got on my bike and proceeded to dash up the hill to my house while he pursued me on foot. After about 100 meters he gave up and I got home. So I tell my mother what happened, and she tells the family of this dude. I think to myself, okay, the grown-ups are involved, I'm safe. The next day there was a note on my bike, a napkin with blue Sharpie telling me I was going to regret telling on him. I was pretty scared, and I once more told my mom, who took the note and showed the parents of the boy. Flash forward about 2 years, I'd been studying Muay Thai and jig jets as a result of this, and I see the guy in our neighborhood. I'm at that time very non-confrontational and still scared of this dude. He walks up to me reaching in his pocket for an airport gun, but at the time I had no way of knowing that, nor did a of the other kids or an adult who owned a real weapon who happened to be watching. So I'm once more doing a mad dash up a hill, on foot with dude wandering behind me when I hear one gunshot and a voice scream, "Get down, don't move," etc. I didn't stop because I thought it was him shooting a real gun and yelling at me. Opt was the adult, firing in the air and making it known he had a pistol. Cops were called, dude was arrested and eventually committed to a mental institution where he was not seen by me again. I was like 9 and I came home from school. I lived right behind it, so I went by myself and my dad usually arrived home an hour after I did, which I didn't mind. So I was home alone. I had this big fear of intruders and what I'd do if there was one. I was constantly paranoid because I could constantly hear my neighbors stomping because the wall isn't that thick. This time though, I heard it from upstairs, the attic. My parents' bedroom. I was immediately frightened and I could hear them coming down the attic stairs. Then suddenly I heard them going down the regular stairs and I was hiding behind a closet. The door opened, it was my dad. I was so scared I couldn't sleep that night at all. I have scarier experiences, but this one is worth sharing. Living in Morgan County, Ohio. I lived there 2 years and the two top of many Twin Peak-like crimes that happened during my short stay were, a guy was given a restraining order from his sister because he would steal her dogs, so after doing a ton of meth he cut down multiple trees blocking the only county road to her house and then broke into her house, tied her to her bed, doused gasoline over her dog kennels then her house and set them both on fire with her and her dogs still inside. He set out a lawn chair and watched the place burn from the lawn for a bit before he blew his head off with a shotgun. Before Morgan County sold some of its lands to AEP, there was a case of 3 large storage barrels found with a charred skeleton in each. Autopsies showed they were all under the age of 10 and had been mutilated before being burned. The case is still unsolved and the victims are unidentified. When I was maybe 9 or 10, my family was hosting Halloween at our house that year and the guests started showing up one by one. I had one dog at the time. One of the guests that knocked at our door is one of my older brother's friends that were invited to go trick-or-treating with us. When we open the door, our dog sprints out the door and at first I was like, she probably has to go pee. So I just follow her out the door. I go outside to my front yard and I see my dog barking at this elderly lady walking her bigger dog. So my first instinct was to go grab my dog, apologize to the lady, and go back inside. But what I saw her do still shocks me to this day. She pulled out a taser and starts scaring my dog with it. I see her get really close to my dog with it. I yell into the house to get my dad, and he comes out screaming at the lady. I remember these words that came out of his mouth: "If you try to taste my dog again, I'll blow your head out." The lady looked at my dad in disgust and started walking along like nothing had happened. That Halloween was still by far the scariest Halloween ever. I was 16 years old walking through the college grounds to get to the gas station to buy snacks. It was getting dark out and I was a bit nervous as I didn't like walking at night in my area, but I really needed those snacks, I guess. As I was approaching the gas station, a man in a hat, about mid-40s, was standing outside of his white work truck. He stopped me and said, "Excuse me miss, do you happen to know the area code around here?" I told him that it was 604. He sat there in his truck for a bit. When I came out, I walked past his truck turning into the college grounds. I heard him start up his truck and it was the absolute worst feeling in my stomach. He ripped out of the parking lot and zipped down the street. I was relieved for a second, but as I continued walking down the path, which was right beside a forest BTW, I looked to the very long dark road that was on the other side of the college. I saw a truck speeding. I knew it was him. It was pitch black, but I just knew it. He knew the area code already. He knew the area well enough to know that there was really only one exit out of the college grounds, unless I decided to take a pitch black walk by myself in the woods. I knew I had to hide. He was approaching the exit quickly. I jumped into a prickle bush, scratching up my hands and legs. I was shaking. The man hopped out of his truck, leaving it running. He slowly walked by the bushes, a little further than where I was, and said, "Come out, come out." I knew that was my only chance. I've never ran so fast in my life. I dashed out of the bushes and sprinted past his truck as he whipped around to chase me. I dropped my bag, phone, etc. I started banging on the closest door, which was my own house, as the door was locked. He probably didn't assume it was my house, but I've never seen a truck peel away so quickly. My grandma opened the door and I ran in and collapsed. I couldn't breathe and was shaking uncontrollably. Finally, when I calmed down enough, we called the police and they came over right away. They told us that there had been 2 similar complaints of the same description of the man and his truck that evening. The police walked with me to grab my bag. We never heard any more to do with the situation, but I never walked anywhere at night again. A few years ago I was camping with my ex and my 1-year-old son. Our tent was situated on the corner of the campsite at a sort of intersection, with one road leading towards unoccupied group campsites and one lined with trailers. We were the last occupied spot beyond the intersection. While we were at the park, there was this blue car from out of province that drove by me while I was walking around more than once. Sometimes I was alone and sometimes I was with my family. The 2 guys inside the car would always make a point of being friendly and saying hi, and I would smile and say hi back. Nothing seemed weird about the situation at first. Then one day my family and I went to the pool together, and after swimming I took off my bikini top and wrapped myself tightly in a towel. We wound up taking a different road/path back to our campsite because my ex wanted to take pictures of the trains nearby, so he went to sit by the tracks alone while I walked back to the site with my son. A few trailers away from our campsite I noticed the blue car, and one of the guys was outside of their trailer. He made a crude comment about what was under my towel, but I laughed it off and kept walking with my son. We got back to the campsite and I put my son in his playpen and was about to start a fire when I noticed the blue car driving slowly up the road towards our campsite. They turned away from us at the intersection beside the campsite, as if they were leaving the park, and I dismissed them again. Less than a minute later I looked up and they had turned around and were coming back towards my son and me. And well, you ever just know something is wrong? At this point I started a mantra under my breath of please turn, in hopes that they were heading back to their trailer, even though I knew in my gut they weren't. When they reached the intersection, they continued straight towards us instead of turning towards their trailer. At that point, I grabbed my son from his playpen and started running barefoot across the gravel road, between the trailers, looking for literally anyone. Behind me I heard the blue car kicking up gravel, so I looked over my shoulder and noticed they had turned around and were trying to follow me. Luckily, I managed to find a couple sitting outside their trailer and asked if my son and I could join them. I explained what was going on and they let us sit with them and even offered to get my son snacks. While we were sitting there, I noticed the car doing circles around the park. I know they were looking for me/us, and I'm not sure if they saw where I was or just gave up. Once I got confirmation that my ex was at the campsite, I went back with my son, and thankfully that was our last night. I didn't sleep well, no surprise there. I still get sick thinking about what could have happened if I didn't pick up my son and run. I've been in dangerous situations countless times, but knowing that my son was at risk and thinking he could have been harmed in any way is more terrifying than anything. When I was 17, my mom found out that my dad had cheated on her over the course of a decade with the same number of women. She was an idiot and stuck around, but that's not the point. One night I was up in my room watching movies when I heard her shout for my name. Now, I was terrified that I had somehow done something wrong, so I booked it down the stairs, already shaking. When I got to the living room where she had yelled for me, the house was empty. Then I heard a thud from the garage. So I ran outside and saw my parents in a full physical fight. She ripped his shirt, and he threw her to the ground. Her head smacked the pavement and she was out cold. I started screaming for help, and that's when my stepdad turned on me. He started chasing me down the asphalt, mind you I'm in Panamas and barefooted, to do the same thing to me. Unfortunately I'm disabled and he caught up with me very quickly, so I turned around and braced myself against him. He tried to shove me to the ground, and when that didn't work, he backed up and smacked out of me. My glasses went flying and I found them broken in the dirt. When I got them back on, he was headed back towards my mom, so I ran after him screaming and trying to shove him off of her. He was holding her and begging her to wake up. Eventually she did wake up with her scalp split open. I took her to the bathroom and locked him out of it to help her. I'll never get the image of my mother woozy and barely coherent out of my mind. Once I cleaned her up and sat her on the couch, I tried to call the cops and she wouldn't let me. She didn't want to deal with my stepdad's abuse publicly. After that day my stepdad stayed away from the house, would scream at him daily until he left, and I ended up having to take care of my mother for 5 months, including making her eat, shower, etc., not because of brain damage but because she completely shut down emotionally and mentally. We slept on the couch together every night because she was afraid to be alone. Turns out the whole debacle started because my mom was texting a friend of hers and my stepdad stole her phone, intent on exposing her cheating, although she never cheated. I genuinely believe that if I hadn't been strong enough to handle him shoving me, that I and my mother would both be dead.
My husband and I live in the hood. We usually keep our heads down and try to not get super involved with any particularly dangerous people. When we do, we're always nice and polite. We do our best to establish that we have no interest in getting involved with conflicts that don't involve us firsthand. People respect that, thankfully, and so only really come to us if they want advice or just to vent. My husband especially is really good at helping people with these things. With that being said, there's still things we can't really avoid. For instance, one time there was a drive-by right next to our house. Nobody got hurt, thankfully, but it was pretty intense. We were lying on the bed watching YouTube and playing with our dogs. It was this huge bang. I think 1-2 more bangs followed. I remember that my first instinct was to jump in front of the window where we heard it. My husband dropped to the ground and thought that our pets and I did too. Then I immediately thought to crouch over our pets. Then he pulled me off the bed and sort of crouched over me. He told me later to never do such things again, that my first response needs to be to get low to the floor. Anyways, we stayed like that for a good while. At least, it felt like we did. We stayed up pretty late that night, just in case it happened again. It was pretty crazy though, because it turned out the guy that was targeted in the drive-by was someone my husband talked to every now and then. Like, they would see each other in public and chat for a while. He was with his pregnant girlfriend when it happened. Again, please don't worry, nobody got hurt. But yeah, that's really the only time, except almost drowning as a kid, I ever was actually terrified me and my loved ones' lives.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.